There is a silent hour in every life, an invisible crossroad that appears not with flashing lights or loud applause, but with stillness. That moment comes after disappointment, after exhaustion, after pretending for too long. It comes after you've tried everything and been everything for everyone else. You have sacrificed your time, your peace, your voice, all to fit into a place you were never meant to stay, and then, almost like a whisper, a realization dawns: what if I choose myself? This moment, the moment you make that decision, is not dramatic, but it is definitive. It is the turning point. It's the moment that separates the person you were from the person you're about to become. That one decision carries more power than 100 strategies, because it places the authority of your life back into your own hands. For the first time, you stop looking around and start looking within. For the first time, you stop waiting for someone to pick you, call you, or save you. And you pick yourself. It is the moment of decision that determines destiny. That decision doesn't come with certainty, but it does come with clarity. You may not know how the journey unfolds, but you know you can't stay where you are. You can no longer deny yourself the life you know you're meant to live, and so you make the decision. You choose you. And when you choose yourself, something incredible happens. You release a surge of energy that had been trapped beneath fear, doubt, and hesitation. That energy doesn't just fuel you, it reshapes you. You start showing up with a fire you didn't know you had. Your eyes begin to reflect a different kind of light. Not arrogance, not ego, but power, quiet power, certain power, the kind that comes from choosing. The world around you may not notice at first. That's because the shift begins inside. It's internal, it's silent, but it's seismic. You don't announce it. You don't need to. You feel it in the way you carry yourself. You feel it in your walk, in your speech, in your thoughts. You begin to honor yourself in a way that you never have before. You begin to protect your peace, guard your time, and demand more, not from others, but from yourself. You understand now that nothing changes until you do. No one is coming to give you a better life. No one is going to hand you the permission slip to live boldly. No one will choose you with the intensity that you must choose yourself. And once that truth settles in your soul, you become unstoppable, because you are no longer trying to escape the fire. You become the fire. You become the one who rises from the ashes of disappointment. You become the one who doesn't beg for acceptance. You don't negotiate your value. You don't explain your worth. You don't lower your standards to be liked. Because when you choose yourself, you start walking in alignment with who you were designed to be. And the moment you do that, life begins to respond differently. The people who once ignored you now feel your absence. The spaces that once rejected you start to feel small. You realize that your elevation didn't require anyone else's permission, just your own. And now that you've given yourself the green light, there is no turning back. This is what happens when you finally choose yourself. You stop hesitating. You stop explaining. You stop making excuses for your greatness. You begin, you move, you act, you decide. You take ownership of your life, your time, your energy. And the world, whether it likes it or not, must adjust to the new version of you. That version isn't louder. It's not reckless. It's not desperate. It's calm, focused, determined. It's not trying to prove anything. It simply is. That's the power of choosing yourself. You no longer live in reaction. You live in creation. You wake up with intention. You walk with purpose. You don't need outside motivation because you have internal ignition. You are fueled by a different source now. Self-respect, and self-respect changes everything. It changes the way you treat your body, your mind, your money, your time. You no longer entertain relationships that drain you, habits that break you, or environments that suffocate you. You become selective, not because you're superior, but because you finally understand your value. You're no longer desperate for inclusion. You're focused on alignment, and this focus leads you to build, to create, to become, because when you choose yourself, you stop wasting energy trying to fit in, and you start using that energy to build a life that fits you. A life of meaning, a life of integrity, a life of clarity. You learn to walk alone, and you're not afraid of the silence. You welcome it, because it's in that silence that you hear the call of your soul. And this time you answer, and what happens next is even more powerful. You begin to trust yourself, not just occasionally, but deeply. You start to realize that your instincts were right all along, that the dreams you once buried were not foolish, they were prophetic. That the voice you once silenced was not weak, it was divine, and now that voice becomes your compass. You don't run to others for answers. You don't ask for opinions to validate your dreams. You don't look outward, you look inward. Because that's where the gold is. That's where the blueprint is. That's where the strength is. It's been there the whole time, waiting for you to choose yourself so it could be activated. And now it is. Now you move with a confidence that isn't loud but cannot be ignored. You make decisions faster, you speak clearer, you negotiate better, you walk away quicker, you no longer explain your boundaries, you enforce them. You no longer fear being alone, you treasure it, because you know that solitude is no longer a punishment, it's a gift. This is what happens when you finally choose yourself. You step into the fullness of your power. You stop chasing things that were never meant for you. You no longer seek to be needed. You seek to be true, and truth becomes your guide. Integrity becomes your standard. Growth becomes your obsession. And once you become obsessed with growth, you stop seeing failure as final. You stop seeing rejection as personal. You stop seeing pain as punishment. You begin to see every experience as a teacher. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes preparation. You become mentally untouchable, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger, and this strength is not loud. It doesn't boast, it doesn't scream, it doesn't compete. It simply becomes. It walks into rooms with presence. It makes decisions with clarity. It leaves situations with peace. That is the strength of someone who has chosen themselves, because choosing yourself means you no longer betray yourself. You no longer ignore your needs to please others. You no longer stay where you are tolerated. You go where you are celebrated, or you create that space yourself. And the more you do this, the more you begin to see how you were always the key. You were always the answer. You were always the one. The world may have tried to distract you, confuse you, diminish you, but none of that mattered once you chose you. That one decision reclaims everything. Your time, your energy, your voice, your future, your identity, because choosing yourself is not selfish. It's sacred. It's the starting point of every great transformation. And once you cross that line, nothing looks the same. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's opinions. You no longer compete in someone else's race. You are focused, driven, locked in, and from that place, everything changes, not instantly, but inevitably. Because when you choose yourself, you don't just change your path. You change your identity. You stop being the version of you shaped by fear, and you become the version of you shaped by vision. The version of you that refuses to wait, refuses to shrink, refuses to settle once you choose yourself. A shift occurs not just in your behavior, but in your very identity. And with that shift, a silent power begins to awaken within you. A power that was always there, but suppressed, hidden behind the layers of self, doubt, fear of judgment, and the weight of other people's expectations. But now that you've made the inner decision, you begin to operate with a new sense of self. You don't just think differently, you attract differently, because now you've started to believe not just in possibilities, but in yourself. Belief is a force. It's the hidden engine behind every transformation, every triumph, every legacy. And when that belief is directed inward, toward your own identity, your purpose, your capabilities, it becomes the catalyst for a new reality. You start to see that what you expect from life begins to change. Why? Because belief is magnetic. It reshapes your energy, and energy, whether you see it or not, is always communicating before you speak a single word. You begin to expect greatness, not out of entitlement, but out of conviction. You begin to walk into rooms with authority, not because someone granted it to you, but because you stopped asking for permission to be powerful. You believe in your ideas, in your vision, in your potential. And that belief acts like a magnet, drawing to you the people, the opportunities, the lessons, and the breakthroughs that were invisible before, not because they didn't exist, but because you didn't see yourself as worthy of them. Now you do, and that changes everything. People feel it. They notice something different. They may not be able to explain it, but they sense the shift. It's in your posture. It's in your decisions. It's in your presence. You're no longer hiding. You're no longer negotiating your greatness in exchange for comfort. You've stopped watering yourself down to be digestible for people who could never see the fullness of who you are. And once you stop seeking validation from the outside, you free yourself from a trap that enslaves most people for their entire lives. You stop needing compliments to feel competent. You stop needing applause to feel valuable. You stop needing company to feel complete. You become whole, not because of what you've gained, but because of what you've finally accepted. You were never broken to begin with. Believing in yourself makes you magnetic, not just to what you want, but to what aligns. You begin to attract things that reflect the frequency of your self-worth. Your circle shifts. The conversations you engage in change. The opportunities you're offered become different. Doors that were closed start to open, not because you forced them, but because you rose to the level where they now recognize your presence. You no longer have to chase, beg, or prove. You attract, align, and receive. But this is not magic, it's mindset. It's the result of building belief through action, through discipline, through integrity. Every time you show up for yourself, you increase your inner faith. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you compound self-respect. And the more you respect yourself, the less tolerant you become of anything that disrespects your potential. You don't wait to be chosen. You don't beg to be seen. You are the standard, not by force, but by frequency. Not by aggression, but by alignment. That's what belief does. It shapes your inner environment so powerfully that your outer world can't help but reflect it. And when you choose yourself, when you believe in yourself with that quiet, immovable certainty, you stop trying to become desirable and start becoming undeniable. Because now everything you do flows from worth, not from worry. From confidence, not from comparison, from purpose, not from panic. And when that happens, you don't just attract what's good. You attract what's meant for you. You no longer crave attention. You crave alignment. You no longer rush to impress. You slow down to impact. You're not asking, will they like me? You're asking, does this match my mission? And that shift alone will change the quality of your relationships, the direction of your decisions, and the level of peace in your life. Because people can feel when you've chosen yourself. They can feel when you've declared, I am enough. They can feel when you're not auditioning for their approval anymore. And ironically, when you stop trying to be chosen, when you stop trying to be needed, you start becoming what the world didn't know it was looking for. You become a reflection of self-ownership, and that is magnetic. But this magnetism has a cost. It comes with separation. When you rise into belief, you detach from what no longer serves you, and that includes people, not all, but many, because some relationships were built on your smallness, not your strength. They were built on your compliance, not your courage. And when you grow beyond that dynamic, the relationship can't hold, not because you're better, but because you're different now, and that's okay. That's part of the price. Because choosing yourself will cost you comfort. It will cost you approval. It may cost you proximity to people who once mattered. But what you gain in exchange is priceless. Peace, power, purpose, and people who match your new frequency. Because when you choose yourself, you change your vibration, and your vibration determines your environment. You begin to realize that chasing never got you anywhere worth keeping, that validation from others is the most addictive drug there is, and self-worth is the only cure. You understand now that when you were busy trying to be liked, you were losing your identity. But when you love yourself, when you believe in yourself, when you choose yourself, what's meant for you becomes drawn to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you became it. You become the magnet, not the pursuer. You become the source, not the seeker. Because you've tapped into the law that governs all creation, you don't get what you want. You get what you are. And now that you are rooted in belief, in self-respect, in alignment, in purpose, your reality begins to reflect your internal transformation. But this transformation didn't start with success. It started with solitude. It started when you were alone, when you were overlooked, when no one understood what you were building. That loneliness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It was in that silence that you discovered your own voice. It was in that space that you remembered your value. It was in that darkness that you became your own light. And once you've become that light, you stop looking for someone else to complete you. You stop searching for external salvation. You become the answer you were always hoping would appear. You look in the mirror, and for the first time you see not the flaws, but the fire, not the past, but the potential, not the pain, but the purpose. Because choosing yourself isn't just an act of courage. It's an act of creation. It's how you birth the next version of yourself. It's how you shift from reacting to life to designing it. It's how you stop living from your wounds and start living from your wisdom. And when you do, you stop chasing things that were never meant for the version of you you've become. You're no longer tempted by noise. You're no longer drawn to chaos. You're no longer available for confusion. Because peace has become your standard. And peace only comes when you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. When you finally choose yourself, the world you once knew falls away, and a new world emerges. A world where you don't tolerate half love, half effort, half truths. A world where you show up fully, speak clearly, act boldly. A world where your presence doesn't beg it commands. A world where your absence teaches more than your presence ever could. Because now, your silence is strategic. Your space is sacred. Your time is valuable. Your energy is selective. You are no longer available for smallness. You are no longer willing to dim your light for the sake of belonging. You no longer fear rejection, because you understand that anything that costs you your peace is too expensive once you've walked through the fire of solitude, silence, and self-respect. You come out carrying something more precious than anything this world can give you: freedom. Not the freedom of circumstances, but the freedom of choice. And with that freedom, you begin to master a new reality. You start setting standards that honor your value. You no longer move like someone who is hoping for the best. You move like someone who has become the best version of themselves, not because of what they acquired, but because of what they released. You release the need to over-explain yourself. You release the urge to shrink in rooms that don't know how to hold your presence. You release the weight of comparison, the need for validation, and the fear of being misunderstood. You release it all because you finally know who you are, and knowing who you are makes you dangerous to every lie you used to believe. Your boundaries become non-negotiable. Your peace becomes your baseline. You no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as humor, or chaos dressed as passion. You walk away from anything that dishonors your spirit, not because you're bitter, but because you've healed. And healing teaches you that love does not require suffering, that connection does not require betrayal, and that success does not require burnout. You stop performing and start living. This is what happens when you master the art of setting standards. People may call you too serious, too intense, too different. Let them, because they're speaking from the perspective of a version of you that no longer exists. You are not obligated to keep explaining your growth to those committed to misunderstanding it. You have evolved, and evolving means becoming unavailable for what once drained you. It means saying no without guilt. It means leaving the room without apologizing. It means holding your space without explaining why you deserve it. And the moment you stop diluting yourself to make others comfortable is the moment your real life begins. You no longer worry about being liked. You focus on being in integrity. You no longer focus on fitting in. You focus on rising above, and people feel that. They sense that you're not desperate, that you don't need anything they're not willing to give freely, that you will never again beg for basic respect, consistency, or honesty, that your standards are not demands, they are reflections of your worth, and anyone who cannot rise to meet them disqualifies themselves, quietly, peacefully, without drama, because you no longer fight for things that you have to chase. You are not chasing, you are attracting, you are not begging, you are choosing, you are not hoping. They will rise. You are honoring the fact that you did. And when people realize that your time, your attention, your love must now be earned, not assumed, the dynamics shift. Not because you said something, but because you became something. You became the standard. You became the one who leads with discipline, clarity, and truth. You became the one who no longer engages in pointless conversations, meaningless connections, or energy-draining situations. You became the one who speaks with precision, acts with purpose, and lives with principle. And that version of you doesn't lower themselves to be understood. They rise to be undeniable. But this evolution didn't happen in a day. It was forged in the unseen moments, the quiet discipline, the lonely nights, the tear-filled breakthroughs, the gut-wrenching honesty it took to see where you were still betraying yourself. You faced the truth. You owned your pain, you stopped blaming others and took full responsibility for your life. That's the part most avoid, that's why most stay stuck, but not you. You went within, you did the inner work. You rewired your mind, rebuilt your habits, and raised your frequency. You started keeping promises to yourself. You started showing up differently, and in doing so, you taught the world how to treat you, not through your words, but through your actions, through your energy, through your silence, because silence is a language of its own. When you stop explaining and start executing, people notice. They feel the shift. You no longer respond to disrespect. You remove yourself. You no longer engage with low energy. You elevate above it. You no longer play small to maintain connections. You play big and let the right ones catch up. And in that space, your real tribe begins to appear. The ones who don't feel threatened by your strength. The ones who don't compete with your growth. The ones who celebrate your wins, support your boundaries, and understand your silence. They match your frequency because they're doing their own work too. You don't need to carry them. You don't need to shrink for them. You grow together. That's alignment. That's maturity. That's the reward of choosing yourself. Because when you choose yourself long enough, you start creating a new world. A world where high standards are normal, where integrity is expected, where peace is protected, where time is sacred. You start designing a life that reflects your inner values, not someone else's expectations. You stop existing, and you start thriving, but to thrive you must remain committed, committed to your vision, committed to your truth, committed to your daily habits, no matter how boring, how difficult, or how invisible they may feel. Because success is not built on emotion, it's built on execution. And people who execute consistently build lives that others admire and envy, not because of luck, but because of discipline. You wake up with intention. You protect your morning, you master your focus, you stop waiting for motivation and start operating on structure. You build momentum not through intensity, but through repetition, and in time your life becomes a mirror of your values. You no longer fear missing out, because what you're building within is more powerful than anything you're missing out on out there. You start valuing your own voice more than the noise. You start seeking internal clarity more than external validation. You begin to live from vision, not from history. Your decisions are no longer made from fear. They are made from conviction, and from this place, your past no longer defines you. Your standard does. And once you're guided by a standard, not just a goal, your life becomes different. Goals can shift, goals can wait, Goals can disappoint, but standards are non-negotiable. They govern your behavior. They direct your energy. They determine what you allow and what you walk away from. They keep you grounded when things are hard, and they keep you focused when things are easy. That's why your power doesn't fluctuate anymore, it's anchored. And now, everything you do reflects that anchor. Your relationships reflect it. Your bank account reflects it. Your schedule reflects it, because your life is always responding to your standards, and your standards are shaped by one thing: how much you value yourself. That's why choosing yourself isn't a one-time event, it's a lifestyle. You choose yourself every day in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you treat your body, in the people you allow access to your heart, in the way you honor your time, in the boundaries you uphold, in the decisions you make when no one's watching. That's the real you, the one that emerges when the mask drops and the performance ends. And when you live from that place, you no longer fear starting over. You no longer fear losing what's not meant for you. You no longer fear being alone, because you're not lonely, you're aligned, and alignment is the birthplace of clarity, confidence, and conviction. You stop guessing. You stop overthinking. You stop asking for directions from people who have never been where you're going, because you know where you're going. You may not have the whole map, but you have the mission. You have the internal compass. And that compass is more powerful than any approval, any applause, or any opinion. It's what keeps you grounded when things get hard. It's what keeps you focused when life gets loud. It's what keeps you rising, even when no one's clapping. Especially then, that's what it means to truly choose yourself. It means you stop waiting for the world to believe in you, and you become the one who believes first. It means you stop living to be understood, and you start living to be fulfilled. It means you stop waiting for permission, and you start giving yourself authority, the authority to walk away, the authority to speak up, the authority to say no, the authority to rise above every version of yourself that was built on survival, fear, or lack. Because now, you lead your life from power, from purpose, and from the unshakable truth that everything you are becoming is already inside of you, waiting to be activated by your decision to never again abandon yourself for anything or anyone that cannot rise with you. When you finally choose yourself, everything changes. You no longer seek permission, approval, or validation. You become your own source of power. Your standards rise, your peace becomes sacred, and your life begins to reflect the strength within you. You stop chasing and start attracting. You walk in alignment, speak with clarity, and live with purpose. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. It's how you break free from old patterns and build a future that honors your truth. Because the moment you decide you are enough, the world responds in kind. You don't just survive. You lead, you elevate, you become unstoppable.